At 32, Richardson lived like time was his servant. His tech company had just been valued at $800 million. His calendar was packed with meetings that could make or break startups. His phone buzzed constantly with investors, celebrities, and influencers wanting a piece of his golden touch. But that morning, something felt different. He stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Los Angeles wake up beneath him, and for the first time in years, he felt empty. All the success, all the money, all the parties, none of it filled the hollow space in his chest that had been growing wider each day. His fingers traced the glass as a memory surfaced. A girl with bright eyes and an infectious laugh, someone who used to make him feel whole just by being near. Esther, his childhood friend from Brooklyn who'd moved away when they were 17. He'd pushed the thought away, as he always did. Richardson grabbed his keys to the Lamborghini, telling himself he was just running late for a breakfast meeting. But deep down, he knew he was running from something much deeper. The engine roared to life. He pulled onto Sunset Boulevard, the morning sun creating a golden haze over the city. His phone rang. Another investor, another deal, another distraction from the emptiness that seemed to grow with every mile. He reached for the phone. That's when everything changed. "Hello, family. This is your favorite Dr. Phillips. I want to hold on here so we could dive straight into the story. But before we begin, please do me a favor. Please hit subscribe and tap on the like button. It tells YouTube that love stories like this matters. Now let's continue." The phone slipped from Richardson's fingers as he reached across the passenger seat, his eyes leaving the road for just 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would rewrite his entire existence. When he looked up, the world was moving in slow motion. A delivery truck had stopped suddenly ahead. His Lamborghini was flying toward it at 60 miles per hour. Richardson's hands gripped the steering wheel, his foot slamming the brakes, but physics had already made its decision. The impact was thunder and lightning combined. Metal screamed against metal. Glass exploded like deadly confetti. Richardson's body whipped forward, then back, his spine compressing in ways nature never intended. Then, silence. No pain. That should have been his first warning. Richardson tried to move his legs. Nothing. He commanded them to respond, to push against the twisted wreckage pinning him down. Nothing. A strange numbness spread through his lower body like ice water filling a container. Sir, can you hear me?" A paramedic's voice cut through the fog in his head. I can't feel my legs," Richardson whispered, his voice barely audible over the sirens now filling the air. The paramedic's face changed. Richardson caught the look, the professional mask slipping for just a moment, revealing something that made his blood run cold. "Pity. We're going to take good care of you," the paramedic said. But Richardson heard what he didn't say. "This is bad. This is really bad." As they loaded him onto the stretcher, Richardson stared up at the California sky, still perfect in blue, mocking him with its beauty. His phone, cracked in bleeding battery acid, lay on the asphalt beside the wreckage. He closed his eyes, and for some reason, he thought of Esther again. Her laugh, her smile, the way she used to make him feel like he could conquer anything. But conquering required legs that worked, dreams that weren't shattered, a future that wasn't disappearing with every mile the ambulance traveled toward the hospital. Richardson Hayes, the man who'd built an empire, was about to discover that sometimes the universe has other plans. The sterile white ceiling of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center became Richardson's unwelcome companion for the next 3 weeks. He'd memorized every crack, every water stain, every shadow that the overhead lights created during his endless hours of staring upward. Dr. Martinez had delivered the verdict with clinical precision that somehow made it worse. Complete spinal cord injury at L1. "The damage is extensive, Mr. Hayes. I'm sorry, but you'll never walk again. Never." Such a small word to carry such enormous weight. Richardson's fingers traced the edge of his hospital blanket for the 1,000th time, the only movement that felt real anymore. From the waist down, his body had become a stranger, present but absent, there but not there. The doctors called it phantom sensation, but Richardson knew better. It was phantom everything. Phantom life, phantom future, phantom dreams. His phone sat on the bedside table, silent now. The calls had stopped after the first week. Business associates offering hollow condolences before quickly shifting conversations back to stock prices and market projections. Friends who promised to visit but never showed. The world had moved on without him, as worlds do. Richardson's mother had flown in from New York, her face a mask of barely contained horror. She'd sat beside his bed for exactly 47 minutes, making awkward small talk about the weather and hospital food before excusing herself to handle some arrangements. She hadn't returned. "I have to think about the family reputation," she'd whispered to his father in the hallway, unaware that Richardson could hear every word. "The board is already asking questions. We can't afford to be associated with this. That's what he'd become. Not Richardson, not their son, but this. A problem to be managed, a liability to be contained. His father had been even more direct. "Son, you understand the position this puts us in. The company, the shareholders. Maybe it's better if you take some time away. Let things settle." Translation: disappear. Become invisible. Stop being an embarrassment. Richardson's empire crumbled faster than it had been built. His board of directors voted him out during a meeting he attended via video call from his hospital bed. They cited medical leave and temporary incapacity, but Richardson read between the lines. They'd been waiting for an excuse to push him out, and his shattered spine had handed them the perfect opportunity. The penthouse felt different when he finally returned home. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor took forever, each floor a reminder of heights he'd never reach on his own power again. His new reality came with wheels, ramps, and a live-in nurse named Margaret who spoke to him like he was a child. "Time for your medication, Mr. Hayes," she'd chirp every morning, holding out pills that promised to dull the emotional pain but never quite succeeded. Richardson fired her after 2 weeks. He fired the physical therapist after 3. He fired anyone who dared to look at him with sympathy, or, worse, hope. The isolation was intoxicating in its completeness. Richardson discovered he could go days without speaking to another human being. Food arrived via delivery apps. Groceries appeared at his door. The world had become something he observed through glass, his windows, his screens, his carefully constructed barriers. But isolation had a way of amplifying thoughts, and Richardson's thoughts had turned dark. He'd begun researching methods. Clean methods, dignified methods, methods that wouldn't leave too much mess for someone else to clean up. The internet was surprisingly helpful for such inquiries, offering detailed instructions with the clinical detachment of a user manual. The knife sat on his coffee table for 3 days before he worked up the courage to pick it up. His hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in months. The blade caught the afternoon light streaming through his windows, and for a moment it looked almost beautiful. Richardson pressed the metal against his wrist, not hard enough to cut, just hard enough to feel. The cold steel against his skin was the most real sensation he'd experienced since the accident. He closed his eyes and thought about peace, about silence, about the end of this half-life he'd been living. The blade moved slightly, and a thin line of red appeared on his skin. That's when his phone rang. Richardson's hand jerked, the knife clattering to the marble floor. The sound echoed through his empty penthouse like a bell tolling. He stared at the screen, expecting to see his assistant's name, or maybe a business contact he'd forgotten to block. Instead, he saw a name that made his heart stop. Esther. Esther was calling him. His finger hovered over the decline button. She didn't need to see him like this. She didn't need to witness what he'd become. But something in him, some stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished, made him answer. "Richardson?" Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Warm honey with just a touch of Brooklyn accent. "Oh my God, I just heard. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. "How do you explain to someone who knew you when you were whole that you're now broken beyond repair?" "I'm coming to see you," she continued, not waiting for his response. "I'm already at LAX. I'll be there in an hour." "Esther, no. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're hurt, and you're alone, and you think that changes anything between us." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "Well, it doesn't. We promised each other we'd always be there, remember? When we were kids, we said nothing would ever change that." Richardson looked at the knife on the floor, then at the blood on his wrist, then at the empty penthouse that had become his prison. "Everything's changed, Esther. Everything—" "No," she said simply. "You're still you. And I'm still here." The line went quiet for a moment, and Richardson could hear the sounds of Los Angeles traffic through her phone. She was really coming. After 15 years of silence, she was coming to see him at his lowest point. "Don't hang up," she whispered. "Just don't hang up. Talk to me until I get there. Tell me about the sunrise from your windows. Tell me about anything except goodbye." Richardson leaned back in his wheelchair, his phone pressed to his ear like a lifeline. Through his windows, the city sparkled in the afternoon light, and for the first time in months, he found words. "The mountains look different from up here," he began, his voice cracking. "They're purple today. I never noticed that before." "Keep talking," Esther said softly. "I'm on my way." And for the first time since the accident, Richardson Hayes believed that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Richardson had 47 minutes to prepare for a moment 15 years in the making. 47 minutes to decide whether to hide the man he'd become or show Esther the wreckage of who he used to be. He wheeled himself to the bathroom mirror, confronting his reflection for the first time in weeks. The man staring back was a stranger, hollow cheeks, stubbled jaw, eyes that had lost their fire. His hair, once perfectly styled for board meetings and magazine covers, hung limp and unwashed. "You look like hell," he whispered to his reflection, then laughed bitterly. "At least you're honest." Richardson attempted to clean himself up, navigating the modified bathroom with clumsy determination. Every action that used to be automatic now required thought, planning, adaptation. Shaving became a complex operation. Choosing clothes meant considering what would look best while seated. Getting dressed was a battle against fabric and gravity that left him exhausted. But he did it. For her, he did it. The penthouse felt different as he waited. The space that had become his prison now seemed exposed, vulnerable. Every surface told the story of his decline. Empty takeout containers, unopened mail, prescription bottles scattered like evidence of his surrender. Richardson's phone buzzed. A text from Esther, downstairs. Coming up. His heart hammered against his ribs. What would she see when those elevator doors opened? Would she recognize the boy from Brooklyn who used to climb fire escapes just to make her laugh? Or would she see only the broken man in the chair, the shadow of dreams that would never be? The elevator chimed. Footsteps approached his door, light, quick, eager. The same rhythm he remembered from their childhood, when she'd run up 3 flights of stairs to his family's apartment, never once out of breath, always ready for their next adventure. The doorbell rang. Richardson's hand trembled as he reached for the handle. This was it. The moment when reality would crash into memory, when 15 years of silence would either dissolve or solidify into something permanent. He opened the door. Esther stood in the hallway, and time collapsed. She was 32 now, not 17, but her eyes held the same warmth that had carried him through his darkest childhood moments. Her dark hair was longer, framing a face that had grown more beautiful with years, but her smile, that radiant, transformative smile, was exactly as he remembered. She was holding a single photograph. "I kept this," she said softly, showing him the picture. It was them at 17, arms wrapped around each other at their high school graduation, both laughing at something Richardson couldn't remember. They looked invincible in that captured moment, like nothing could ever touch them. "I look at it when I'm sad," she continued, stepping closer. "It reminds me that pure joy exists, that I felt it once, with you." Richardson's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for months. "Esther, I can't." She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level, and placed her hands on his knees. The gentle pressure of her touch on his legs that couldn't feel it somehow made him feel more whole than he had in months. "You're still you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And I'm still here." The words hit him like a physical force. All the walls he'd built, all the isolation he'd embraced, all the reasons he'd convinced himself that he was beyond saving, they crumbled in the face of her unwavering presence. "I can't walk," he said, as if she hadn't noticed. I'm not the man you remember." Esther's eyes searched his face. "The man I remember was kind. He was brilliant, he had the most incredible laugh, and he could make me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. He used to say we'd always find our way back to each other, no matter what happened." She stood up, her hand trailing along his arm. "Are you kind?" Richardson nodded, unable to speak. "Are you brilliant?" Another nod. "Can you still laugh?" I don't know. I haven't tried in months." Esther smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise after the longest night. "Then we'll figure it out together. Just like we always did." She walked into his penthouse, and Richardson watched her take in the space, the expensive furniture, the city view, the obvious signs of his recent spiral. But her expression never changed. She wasn't seeing the prison he'd created. She was seeing the man who'd created it. "This is beautiful," she said, moving to the windows. "You always said you'd live somewhere you could see the whole world." "I can see it," Richardson replied, wheeling himself beside her. "I just can't touch it anymore." Esther turned to him, her hand reaching out to cup his face. "You're touching it right now. You're touching me." The simple contact sent shockwaves through Richardson's system. He'd forgotten what human warmth felt like, what it meant to be seen and accepted without judgment or pity. "I tried to," he began, then stopped. "How do you tell someone you love that you nearly ended everything just an hour before they arrived?" "I know," she said quietly. "I saw the knife on the floor. I saw the blood on your wrist." Richardson's face flushed with shame. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to see that. Don't apologize for pain. Apologize for giving up on us." Her voice was gentle but firm. "We promised each other we'd always be there. That means the good times and the bad times, the victories and the defeats, the walking and the—" "Sitting," Richardson finished, managing a weak smile. "Sitting," she agreed. "Though I've got to say, you've got great taste in chairs. Very sleek." Despite everything, Richardson laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised him, rusty and unfamiliar but real. "There he is," Esther said, her own laughter mixing with his. "There's my Richardson." She sat on the couch beside his chair, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral that brought back memories of summer evenings and stolen kisses on Brooklyn rooftops. "So," she said, settling in as if she planned to stay forever, "tell me everything. Start with the accident, and don't leave anything out. We have time." Richardson looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he'd thought was lost forever. He saw home. He saw hope. He saw the possibility that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be beautiful too. "We have time," he repeated, and for the first time in months, he believed it. Esther moved in the next morning with nothing but a worn leather suitcase and a determination that could have powered the entire city of Los Angeles. She'd booked a hotel room, but Richardson had asked, no, begged her to stay, and something in his voice told her this wasn't about convenience. This was about survival. Just temporarily, she'd said, though they both knew temporary had a way of becoming permanent when hearts were involved. The penthouse transformed within hours of her arrival. Esther had always possessed a special kind of magic, the ability to make any space feel alive just by being in it. She opened curtains that hadn't been touched in months, letting natural light flood rooms that had become shadows of themselves. She hummed while she moved, old songs from their childhood that seemed to wake up corners of Richardson's soul he'd forgotten existed. "You can't live on takeout and sadness," she announced, surveying his practically empty refrigerator. "We're going grocery shopping." Richardson hadn't left his penthouse in weeks, but Esther's enthusiasm was infectious. She pushed his wheelchair through the upscale market like they were on an adventure, commenting on everything from the overpriced organic kale to the elderly couple arguing over which brand of pasta to buy. "Look at them," she whispered, nodding toward the couple. 40 years of marriage, and they're still passionate about linguine versus penne. "That's love." Richardson watched the couple with new eyes. The man was using a walker, moving slowly but steadily, while his wife waited patiently beside him. Neither seemed to notice or care about the disability. They were just two people sharing a life, pasta preferences and all. "I used to think love was about grand gestures," Richardson said quietly. "Expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, jewelry that costs more than most people's cars." "And now?" Esther asked, selecting vegetables with the focus of a surgeon. "Now I think maybe it's about being willing to argue about pasta for 40 years. Esther smiled, and Richardson felt something stir in his chest, not the desperate longing he'd carried for her as a teenager, but something deeper, something that felt like coming home. Back at the penthouse, Esther took over the kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd learned to cook out of necessity rather than passion. She'd grown up in a house where love was expressed through food, where every meal was a chance to show care. "My grandmother's recipe," she explained, browning garlic in olive oil. "She used to say that food made with love tastes different. I never believed her until I started cooking for people I actually cared about." Richardson watched her work, memorizing the way she moved, the way she hummed under her breath, the way she tasted everything twice before adding more seasoning. His kitchen had been a showpiece before, all granite and steel, designed to impress rather than nourish. Now it felt like the heart of a home. "Tell me about the years between," she said as she stirred the sauce. "Not the business stuff, the real stuff. What made you laugh? What made you cry? Who did you love?" Richardson considered lying, painting a picture of a life full of meaningful relationships and genuine happiness. But Esther had a way of seeing through facades, and he was tired of pretending. "I didn't," he said simply. "I worked, I achieved, I accumulated, but I didn't live. Not really. I kept thinking I'd start living when I reached the next milestone, made the next deal, earned the next recognition. But the milestones kept moving, and living kept getting postponed. Esther stopped stirring. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. What about you? Marriage? Kids? The life you were supposed to have? Her laugh was tinged with something that might have been regret. I came close once. David. He was a good man, stable, kind, wanted all the right things. But when he proposed, the first thing I thought was, this isn't how Richardson used to make me feel. Richardson's heart skipped. You thought about me? Every day for 15 years. Not obsessively, not in a way that stopped me from living, but you were there, in the quiet moments. The benchmark for what real connection felt like. She served the pasta in bowls that had never been used, and they ate at his dining table that had previously existed only for show. The food was simple, spaghetti with marinara, garlic bread, a salad, but it tasted like celebration. I have a surprise, Esther said after dinner, pulling out her phone. I made some calls. Before Richardson could ask what she meant, the elevator chimed. Footsteps approached, but these weren't human footsteps. These were the rapid click-click-click of claws on marble. Whiskey. Richardson's voice cracked with emotion as a golden retriever burst through the door, tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled. The dog had been staying with Richardson's assistant after the accident, another casualty of his systematic isolation. Whiskey didn't care about the wheelchair. He jumped up, paws on Richardson's lap, tongue attacking his face with enthusiastic kisses. For the first time in months, Richardson felt unconditional love, pure, simple, uncomplicated. He missed you, Esther said, scratching behind Whiskey's ears. Julie said he's been moping for weeks. Richardson buried his face in Whiskey's fur, breathing in the familiar scent of his companion. I missed him too. I couldn't handle taking care of anything else when I couldn't take care of myself. That's why I'm here, Esther said softly, to help you remember that you're still capable of love, of joy, of all the things that make life worth living. Later that evening, they sat on the couch together. Esther curled up beside Richardson's chair, Whiskey sprawled across both of them. She'd found his old playlist, the one they used to listen to during their teenage years, and familiar melodies filled the space between them. Dance with me, she said suddenly. Richardson gestured to his legs. I can't. Yes, you can. She stood up, extending her hand. Different doesn't mean impossible. She placed her arms around his neck, and he held her waist, and they swayed together in his living room. His chair became part of the dance, not an obstacle to it. Her forehead rested against his, and Richardson felt something he'd thought was lost forever. He felt complete. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For showing me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that different doesn't mean less, that love doesn't require perfection. Esther lifted her head, her eyes searching his face. Richardson. The air between them shifted, charged with possibility. 15 years of separation, months of pain, weeks of healing. All of it led to this moment. This choice. This chance to discover what they could become together. Richardson's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I never stopped loving you. Good, she whispered, leaning closer. Because I never stopped loving you either. 3 weeks later, Los Angeles was drowning in rain. The kind of relentless downpour that made the city feel like a different place entirely. Softer, quieter, more intimate. Richardson sat by his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching water cascade down the glass, distorting the city lights into impressionist paintings. Esther was in the kitchen, making hot chocolate the way she used to when they were kids, with real milk, dark cocoa, and just a touch of cinnamon. The sound of her humming mixed with the rain created a symphony of contentment that Richardson had never experienced in his penthouse before. 2 cups of liquid comfort, she announced, settling onto the couch beside his chair. She changed into one of his old Columbia University sweatshirts, and seeing her in his clothes did something to his heart that he couldn't quite name. You know what I love about rain? She asked, curling her legs beneath her. What? It makes everything feel possible, like the world is washing itself clean, starting over. She sipped her cocoa, leaving a small foam mustache that made Richardson smile. When I was little, I used to think rain was God's way of giving the earth a chance to begin again. Richardson reached out, gently wiping the foam from her upper lip with his thumb. The simple gesture felt more intimate than any grand romantic gesture he'd ever attempted. I've been thinking about beginnings, he said quietly. About what it means to start over when you thought your story was finished. Esther set down her mug, giving him her full attention. What kind of beginnings? Richardson's heart began to race. They'd been dancing around deeper conversations for weeks, content to exist in the bubble of rediscovered friendship and growing attraction. But tonight, with the rain creating a cocoon around them, he felt brave enough to voice the thoughts that had been consuming him. "I used to think my legacy would be the company," he began. "The technology we developed, the deals we made, the valuation numbers. But lying in that hospital bed, watching my empire crumble, I realized that none of it mattered. None of it would outlive me in any meaningful way." "What would matter?" Esther asked softly. Richardson's eyes met hers, and in them he saw the same warmth that had sustained him through his darkest childhood moments. Family, love, children who carry forward the best parts of who we are. Esther's breath caught. "Richardson, I want to be a father," he said, the words rushing out before he could lose his nerve. "I know how that sounds, coming from someone who can't walk, who nearly gave up on life entirely just a month ago. But sitting here with you, watching you bring joy into every space you enter, I can't stop thinking about what we could create together." Esther's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Richardson felt panic rising in his chest. "I know it's complicated," he continued. "I know there are challenges, medical considerations, things we'd have to figure out. But Esther, when I look at you, I see the mother I want for my children. I see the woman who would teach them to find magic in rainy days and comfort in homemade cocoa. I see—" "Stop," Esther whispered, but her voice was gentle, not cutting. Richardson's heart sank. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "You should have," she interrupted, moving from the couch to kneel beside his chair. "You should have said it sooner. Do you know how long I've been waiting for you to realize that your accident didn't change who you are at your core?" She took his hands in hers, and Richardson felt the tremor in her fingers. "I want that too," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I want to have your babies. I want to build a family with you. I want to show our children that love is stronger than circumstances, that happiness isn't about perfection." Richardson's eyes widened. "You do?" "I've wanted it since I was 17 years old," she laughed through her tears. "I used to daydream about what our children would look like, what they'd inherit from each of us, your intelligence, your determination, maybe my stubbornness and my ability to find joy in small things. But the challenges—" "Every family faces challenges," Esther said firmly. "Some people worry about genetics or finances or whether they're ready. We'll worry about different things. But the love, the commitment, the desire to create something beautiful together, that's already there." Richardson pulled her closer until she was sitting on his lap, her arms wrapped around his neck. "I researched it," he admitted. "Fertility options for people with spinal injuries. It's possible. Difficult, but possible. I researched it too," Esther confessed with a shy smile. "The day after I moved in, I couldn't stop thinking about it." They sat in comfortable silence, processing the magnitude of what they'd just shared. Outside, the rain continued its gentle assault on the windows, but inside, everything felt warm and safe and possible. "There's a clinic in Beverly Hills," Richardson said finally. "Dr. Sarah Chen. She specializes in fertility treatments for couples with complex medical situations. I could make an appointment." "We could make an appointment," Esther corrected. "This isn't something you're doing alone anymore." Richardson cupped her face, studying the woman who'd walked back into his life and somehow made him believe in futures he'd thought were impossible. "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once we start this journey, there's no going back. If it works, if we're blessed with children, you'll be tied to me forever. To this," he gestured to his chair, to his limitations. Esther's smile was radiant. "Richardson Hayes, I've been tied to you forever since I was 15 years old. A wheelchair isn't going to change that." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Richardson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope for a future that was bigger than his past. "So, we're really doing this?" he asked. "We're really doing this," Esther confirmed. "We're going to have a family. We're going to be parents. We're going to create something beautiful together." Richardson held her close, listening to the rain and feeling his heart expand with possibilities he'd never dared to dream. Tomorrow they would make phone calls, schedule appointments, begin the complex journey toward parenthood. But tonight they had this moment, this perfect, rain-soaked moment when everything felt possible. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. "All of you, every part of you, forever." Dr. Sarah Chen's office felt more like a luxury hotel lobby than a medical clinic. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and abstract artwork created an atmosphere of calm possibility rather than clinical sterility. Richardson appreciated the thoughtfulness. Fertility treatment was vulnerable enough without fluorescent lights and plastic chairs. "Thank you for seeing us so quickly," Esther said, her hand finding Richardson's as they sat across from Dr. Chen's desk. "When I received Mr. Hayes' call, I cleared my schedule." Dr. Chen replied warmly. "Your case is certainly unique, but far from impossible. I've helped many couples navigate similar challenges." Richardson felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. For weeks, he'd been preparing for rejection, for medical professionals to tell him his dreams were unrealistic. Instead, Dr. Chen spread out charts and treatment plans like she was mapping a journey they could actually take. "The spinal cord injury complicates things but doesn't eliminate them," she explained. "We'll need to use assisted reproductive techniques, but the success rates are quite encouraging. Your sperm quality tests came back excellent, Mr. Hayes. And Esther, your fertility markers are beautiful for a woman your age." Esther squeezed Richardson's hand. "What's the process like?" "Intensive," Dr. Chen said honestly. "Hormone injections for you, Esther. Daily monitoring, precise timing. For Richardson, we'll need to collect samples through electrical stimulation. It's painless, but requires several clinic visits." Richardson had researched the procedure extensively, but hearing it explained in clinical terms made it feel real. "When could we start?" "Next week, if you're ready. But I want to be clear about expectations. This isn't a quick process. It typically takes multiple cycles, and there's no guarantee of success. Are you prepared for that emotional journey?" Richardson and Esther exchanged glances. They'd spent hours discussing exactly this question, usually late at night when vulnerability felt safer. "We're prepared," Esther said firmly. "We've waited 15 years to be together. We can handle waiting a little longer to build our family." 3 days later, Richardson found himself in the clinic's procedure room, trying to maintain his dignity while medical equipment worked to extract what nature could no longer provide naturally. The irony wasn't lost on him. Technology that had once built his empire was now helping him create something infinitely more precious. "How are you feeling?" the technician asked. "Like I'm bargaining with biology," Richardson replied, managing a weak smile. The process was clinical but not cold. The staff treated him with professional kindness, acknowledging his vulnerability without making it feel like pity. When it was over, Richardson felt strangely accomplished. He'd taken the first concrete step toward fatherhood. Meanwhile, Esther had begun her hormone regimen. Richardson watched her transform into a woman possessed by purpose, organizing injection schedules with the precision of a military operation. She'd set up a corner of their bathroom as a medical station, complete with sharps containers and medication timers. "Left hip tonight," she announced, preparing the injection with steady hands. "Are you sure you don't want me to do it?" Richardson asked, though they both knew his angle from the wheelchair made it impractical. "I've got it," she said, but he could see the slight tremor in her fingers. The hormones were affecting her emotions, making her more sensitive to everything. Yesterday, she'd cried at a commercial about puppies. This morning, she'd gotten angry at the coffee maker for being too slow. "Hey," Richardson said softly, wheeling closer. "Talk to me." Esther paused, the needle hovering over her skin. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if my body doesn't respond? What if we go through all this and it doesn't work?" "Then we try again," Richardson said simply. "And if that doesn't work, we try again. And if we exhaust every medical option, we explore other paths. Adoption, surrogacy, whatever it takes." "You'd do that, even if the children weren't biologically yours?" Richardson's heart ached at the question. "Esther, biological connection isn't what makes a family. Love makes a family. Commitment makes a family. The fact that you're willing to inject hormones into your body every day for the chance to carry my child, that's what makes a family." She administered the injection quickly, then fell into his arms, letting him hold her while the medication settled into her system. "I've been thinking about names," she said against his shoulder. "Already? I can't help it. The hormones make me emotional, but they also make me hopeful. I keep daydreaming about holding our baby, about what they'll look like, about the first time they laugh." Richardson found himself getting swept up in her enthusiasm. "What names are you considering?" "For a girl, maybe Nova. It means new star. For a boy, I like Miles. It means soldier, but also peaceful." "Nova and Miles," Richardson repeated, testing the sound. "I love them. What about you? Any thoughts?" "I keep thinking about legacy names. Not mine. I want our children to have their own identities, but maybe names that honor the people who brought us together." "Your grandmother's middle name was Rose, wasn't it?" Esther's eyes filled with tears, the good kind this time. "Rose Nova Hayes." "That's beautiful." And if we have a son, Miles Alexander. Alexander was my grandfather's name. He taught me that strength isn't about what you can do physically, it's about what you can endure emotionally. They spent the evening creating lists, debating middle names, discussing whether they wanted to find out the gender early or wait for a surprise. Richardson felt more energized than he had in months, his mind working through logistics and possibilities with the same intensity he'd once applied to business deals. "I'm going to convert the guest room into a nursery," he announced suddenly. "Regardless of what happens with this cycle, I want to have a space ready. I want to believe this is going to work. What if people think we're being presumptuous?" "Let them think it," Richardson said with growing confidence. "I spent too many years living my life based on other people's expectations. This is about us, about our family, about the future we're building together." Esther straddled his lap, careful not to put pressure on his legs. "I love seeing you like this, excited about something, planning for something good." "You did this," Richardson said, his hands settling on her waist. "You brought me back to life." "We did this," she corrected, then kissed him with the passion of a woman who'd found her purpose. "We're going to be parents, Richardson. I can feel it." As they held each other in the soft light of their living room, Richardson felt something he'd thought was lost forever, the absolute certainty that the future held joy worth fighting for. 2 weeks into the fertility treatments, something shifted between Richardson and Esther. The clinical nature of their baby-making journey had created an unexpected intimacy, sharing needles and medical appointments, discussing hormone levels and ovulation cycles, planning for a future that felt simultaneously distant and immediate. They'd been living together for over a month now, sharing space and meals and quiet moments, but maintaining the careful boundaries of two people rediscovering each other. Separate bedrooms, casual touches that lingered just long enough to spark electricity, conversations that danced around the growing tension between them. But tonight felt different. Esther had just finished her evening injection, and Richardson could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The hormones were taking their toll, mood swings, physical discomfort, the constant awareness of her body's cycles and responses. "Come here," he said softly, patting his lap. She settled against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and Richardson began massaging the injection site on her hip. His hands moved in gentle circles, trying to ease the tenderness that had become her constant companion. "Better?" he asked. Esther's eyes fluttered closed. "Your hands are magic." Richardson's touch grew more confident, his fingers working along the muscles of her lower back, finding knots of tension and carefully releasing them. Esther made small sounds of relief, her body relaxing into his touch. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "About what?" "About us, about this space between friendship and something more, about how we keep pretending we don't want each other." Richardson's hands stilled. "Esther." She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "I know we said we'd take things slow. I know the fertility treatments are complicated enough without adding this. But Richardson, I can't keep pretending that sleeping in separate rooms feels right." "I don't want to rush you," he said quietly. "I don't want you to feel pressured because you're here, because you're helping me through this." "Stop," she interrupted, placing her finger against his lips. "I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because this is where I belong, with you. In whatever way you'll have me." Richardson captured her finger, pressing a kiss to the tip. "I want you," he said honestly. "I've wanted you since the moment you walked through that door. But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of not being enough. Of not being able to give you everything you deserve." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Of you seeing me completely and realizing I'm not the man you remembered." Esther shifted in his lap, her legs moving to straddle him, her hands cupping his face. "Look at me." Richardson met her eyes, seeing love and desire and absolute certainty. "You are everything I remembered and more," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you were before, more compassionate, more real. The accident didn't diminish you. It revealed who you truly are beneath all the armor you used to wear." Her thumbs traced his cheekbones, and Richardson felt years of self-doubt beginning to crack under the weight of her conviction. "I love you," she whispered. "Not despite your chair, not because of it, but completely independent of it. I love your mind, your heart, your hands that know exactly how to touch me. I love the way you make me feel like I'm home after 15 years of wandering." Richardson's control finally shattered. He pulled her closer, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that tasted of everything they'd been holding back. It was desperate and gentle, hungry and reverent, 15 years of longing condensed into this single moment of connection. Esther's hands tangled in his hair, her body pressing against his with an urgency that matched his own. Richardson's hands roamed her back, relearning the curves and contours of the woman who'd never really left his heart. "Are you sure?" he asked against her lips, giving her one last chance to change her mind. "I've never been more sure of anything," she breathed, then stood and took his hand. "Come with me." She led him to his bedroom, the space that had become a sanctuary of solitude, now transformed into something sacred. The city lights streamed through the windows, casting soft shadows across the room. Esther moved slowly, deliberately, her hands reaching for the hem of his shirt. Richardson's breath caught as she lifted the fabric, her fingers tracing the lines of his chest, mapping the geography of his body with reverent attention. "You're beautiful," she whispered, and Richardson felt something heal inside him that he hadn't even realized was broken. His hands found the buttons of her blouse, fumbling slightly with nerves and anticipation. Esther covered his hands with hers, helping him, their fingers working together to remove the barriers between them. When they were skin to skin, Richardson felt the full magnitude of what they were sharing. This wasn't just physical attraction or sexual release, this was communion. Two souls recognizing each other across years of separation and choosing to become whole together. "I need you to know," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "that feeling your heart beat against mine is better than anything I ever felt when I could walk." Esther's eyes filled with tears. "I need you to know that holding you like this feels like coming home to a place I didn't know I was missing." They moved together with the familiarity of lovers who'd been apart too long, their bodies remembering a rhythm they'd never actually shared but somehow knew instinctively. Richardson marveled at how perfectly she fit against him, how her curves aligned with his angles, how her breath synchronized with his. "I can feel you," he said with wonder, his hands exploring every inch of her skin. "I can feel everything." "That's because this isn't just physical," Esther replied, her lips finding the sensitive spot below his ear. "This is our souls recognizing each other." Afterward, they lay entwined, Richardson's arms wrapped around Esther as she rested her head on his chest. The city hummed below them, but inside their bubble of contentment, time seemed suspended. "No regrets?" Richardson asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Only one," Esther said, tilting her head to look at him. Richardson's heart skipped. "What's that?" "That we waited so long to stop pretending we weren't meant for this." Richardson smiled, feeling more complete than he had in his entire life. "Well, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "Yes," Esther agreed, settling back against his chest. "We do." The call came on a Tuesday morning while Richardson was making coffee, and Esther was sprawled across the couch, her feet propped up on cushions, reading a book about pregnancy nutrition. They'd been cautiously optimistic for the past week, ever since Dr. Chen had confirmed that the embryo transfer had been successful. "One heartbeat," Dr. Chen had said during their first ultrasound, and Richardson had felt his own heart nearly explode with joy. "Strong and steady. Congratulations, you're going to be parents." But today's appointment was different. Today was the 8-week scan, the one that would give them their first real look at their growing baby. Richardson had arranged his wheelchair beside the examination table, holding Esther's hand as the ultrasound technician prepared the equipment. "Are you ready to see your little miracle?" the technician asked, her voice warm with the kind of excitement that came from sharing good news all day. "We're ready," Esther replied, though her grip on Richardson's hand suggested she was anything but calm. The technician moved the wand across Esther's barely visible bump, and the screen filled with grainy black and white images that meant everything and nothing to Richardson's untrained eye. But then he heard it, the rapid, rhythmic whooshing that sounded like a tiny hurricane. "There's your baby," the technician said, pointing to a small shape on the screen. "Heart rate is perfect. Growth is right on track." Richardson felt tears spring to his eyes. That tiny blob on the screen was his child, his and Esther's. A person they'd created together, growing inside the woman he loved more than life itself. "Wait," the technician said, moving the wand slightly. "Let me just—" Richardson's heart stopped. Something was wrong. The technician's brow was furrowed, her expression suddenly serious as she adjusted the angle of the wand. "Is everything okay?" Esther asked, her voice tight with worry. "Everything's fine," the technician said quickly. "More than fine, actually. Let me get Dr. Chen." She disappeared from the room, leaving Richardson and Esther alone with their fear and the frozen image on the screen. Richardson squeezed Esther's hand, trying to project calm he didn't feel. "It's okay," he whispered. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Dr. Chen entered the room with a smile that immediately eased their tension. "I hear we have some exciting news to share." "Exciting good or exciting, terrifying? Richardson asked. Exciting, wonderful, Dr. Chen replied, taking the wand from the technician. Let me show you what we're looking at here. She moved the wand across Esther's belly, and suddenly the screen came alive with movement. Here's baby number 1, she said, pointing to a small shape. Beautiful heartbeat, perfect development. Richardson felt his breath catch. Baby number 1? And here, Dr. Chen continued, moving the wand slightly, is baby number 2, also perfect. Esther's free hand flew to her mouth. 2 babies? And here, Dr. Chen said with obvious delight, is baby number 3. The world stopped. Richardson stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. 3 separate heartbeats, 3 tiny forms. 3 babies, triplets, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Spontaneous triplets, Dr. Chen confirmed. No fertility drugs cause this. Sometimes nature just has her own plans. 2 boys and 1 girl, from what I can tell at this stage. Esther began to cry, deep, overwhelmed sobs that shook her entire body. Richardson wasn't sure if she was happy or terrified, or both. Hey, he said softly, bringing her hand to his lips. Talk to me. 3 babies, she managed between sobs. Richardson, we're having 3 babies. I know, he said, though he wasn't sure he actually knew anything anymore. His mind was reeling, trying to recalculate everything they'd planned for 1 child and multiply it by 3. Are you okay? Doctor, Chen asked kindly. This is a lot to process. Richardson started, then stopped. Was he okay? He was terrified, overwhelmed, and more excited than he'd ever been in his life. We're going to need a bigger nursery. Doctor, Chen laughed. You're going to need a lot of things, but right now let's focus on the fact that all 3 babies are healthy and developing beautifully. This is a high-risk pregnancy given the multiples, but there's no reason to believe you can't carry them to term. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, more frequent appointments, bed rest possibilities, the likelihood of early delivery. Richardson tried to absorb the information, but his mind kept returning to the image on the screen. 3 babies, 3 heartbeats, 3 lives they were responsible for creating and nurturing. In the car afterward, they sat in stunned silence. Richardson had driven them to the appointment in his modified Range Rover, but now he found himself unable to start the engine. 3, Esther said finally. 3, Richardson agreed. 2 boys and a girl, Miles and... We need 2 more names. Esther turned to look at him, her eyes red from crying but bright with something that might have been wonder. Are you freaking out? Completely, Richardson admitted. Are you? Absolutely. She paused, then started to laugh. Richardson, we're having triplets. We went from 0 to 3 in 1 appointment. God wants to keep me busy, Richardson said, echoing something his grandfather used to say whenever life threw unexpected challenges his way. Us busy, Esther corrected. We're in this together. Richardson finally started the engine, but before pulling out of the parking space, he reached over and placed his hand on Esther's still flat belly. Hi, babies, he said softly. Daddy's a little scared, but he's so excited to meet you. And Mommy's going to need a lot of help, Esther added, covering his hand with hers. But we're going to love you so much. As they drove home, Richardson's mind began shifting into planning mode. 3 cribs, 3 car seats, 3 college funds, 3 whole human beings depending on them for everything. We can do this, he said, more to convince himself than to inform Esther. We can do this, she agreed firmly. It's going to be chaos and beautiful and terrifying and perfect. Richardson glanced at her, seeing the woman who'd walked back into his life and changed everything. She was carrying his children now, not child, but children. 3 pieces of their combined hearts growing inside her body. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, she replied. All of you. And all of them. Richardson smiled, finally allowing himself to feel the full magnitude of their blessing. They were going to be parents. Not just parents, but parents of 3. Their family was going to be loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. He couldn't wait. 9 months with triplets became a masterclass in controlled chaos. Richardson transformed his penthouse into a fortress of preparation, every room carefully modified to accommodate their growing family. The guest room became a nursery that looked like a small daycare center, 3 cribs positioned so Esther could feed multiple babies simultaneously. Changing stations stocked like a medical supply warehouse and a comfortable chair specifically chosen for Richardson's needs during night feedings. Esther's body became a miracle of expansion. By month 6, she looked like she was carrying a small planet, her belly so round that Richardson marveled at how her skin could stretch to accommodate their 3 growing children. She moved with the careful grace of someone carrying precious cargo, her hands constantly cradling her bump as if protecting the lives within. "They're active tonight," she'd say, and Richardson would place his hands beside hers, feeling the tiny kicks and rolls of their babies. Each movement was a reminder that their family was growing stronger every day. They made the conscious decision to keep the pregnancy private. Richardson's public fall from grace had taught them both the value of protecting what mattered most. No social media announcements, no magazine interviews, no public appearances. This was their sacred time, their chance to build something beautiful away from the world's judgment. "The babies don't need to be born into a media circus," Richardson explained to his former assistant when she suggested a PR strategy. "They need to be born into love." Dr. Chen had warned them that triplets rarely made it to full term, and by week 34, Esther was on strict bed rest. Richardson became her devoted caretaker, bringing her meals, reading to her, and monitoring every twinge and discomfort with the intensity of a man who'd nearly lost everything once and refused to let it happen again. "You're hovering," Esther complained one afternoon, though her smile took the sting out of the words. "I'm attentive," Richardson corrected, adjusting her pillows for the 3rd time in an hour. "You're nervous." "I'm terrified," he admitted, "but the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something matters more than anything else in the world." Esther reached for his hand, guiding it to her belly where one of the babies was pressing against her ribs. "Feel that? That's Miles. He's the strongest, always pushing, always moving." Richardson felt the solid pressure of his son's foot or fist, and his heart swelled with a love so intense it almost hurt. "He's going to be a handful." "All 3 of them are," Esther agreed. "Nova's the quiet one, but I think she's just planning something. And Jackson, he's the peacemaker. When the other 2 get too active, he calms them down." Richardson marveled at how Esther had already developed individual relationships with each baby. She spoke about them like she knew their personalities, their preferences, their quirks. Maybe she did. Maybe carrying them for 9 months had given her insights he couldn't access. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, 36 weeks into the pregnancy. Richardson woke to find Esther sitting on the edge of the bed, her face tense with concentration. "It's time," she said simply. Richardson's carefully planned emergency response kicked into action. Hospital bag, car keys, phone calls to Dr. Chen. But as they headed to the elevator, Esther doubled over with a contraction so intense it made her cry out. "We need to hurry," she gasped. The drive to the hospital became a blur of red lights and shallow breathing. Richardson's hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated LA traffic with the precision of a man whose world was about to change forever. "Talk to me," he said, trying to keep Esther calm while his own heart raced. "I can't," she panted. "They're coming fast." At the hospital, everything accelerated. Wheelchairs, scrubs, monitors beeping urgent warnings. Dr. Chen appeared at their side with the calm efficiency of someone who delivered thousands of babies. "Esther, we need to get you to surgery," she said. "The babies are in distress, and we can't wait for natural labor." Richardson's blood turned to ice. "Surgery?" "Emergency C-section," Dr. Chen explained as they rushed toward the operating room. "It's the safest option for both Esther and the babies." The next hour felt like a lifetime compressed into moments. Richardson, dressed in surgical scrubs, held Esther's hand as the medical team worked with practiced urgency. The bright lights, the beeping machines, the controlled chaos of a delivery room. It all faded into background noise as Richardson focused on Esther's face. "You're incredible," he whispered to her. "You're about to give birth to our children." "We're about to become parents," she replied, her voice weak but determined. "Are you ready?" Before Richardson could answer, Dr. Chen's voice cut through the room. "First baby is here." The cry that followed was the most beautiful sound Richardson had ever heard, loud, indignant, and utterly alive. Miles Alexander Hayes had arrived, announcing his presence to the world with the same determination his father had once shown in boardrooms. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a nurse called out. Perfect APGAR score. 2 minutes later, Jackson David Hayes joined his brother, quieter but equally healthy. 6 pounds, 14 ounces of pure potential. And then Nova Rose Hayes, their daughter, their miracle, their princess, arrived with a delicate cry that sounded like music. 5 pounds, 12 ounces, the nurse announced. All 3 babies are healthy and breathing on their own. Richardson felt something break open in his chest, not pain, but overwhelming joy. He looked at Esther, exhausted but radiant, and saw his entire world reflected in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," Richardson corrected, bringing her hand to his lips. "You brought our babies into the world. One by one, the nurses brought their children to them. Miles, with his shock of dark hair, already looking alert and curious. Jackson, calmer, with Esther's delicate features. And Nova, tiny and perfect, with Richardson's eyes and Esther's stubborn chin. "They're so beautiful," Esther cried, tears streaming down her face. Richardson looked at his 3 children, then at the woman who'd given them life, and felt his heart expand to accommodate a love he'd never imagined possible. "Hello, babies," he said softly. "Welcome to the world. Daddy's been waiting for you your whole lives." In that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Richardson Hayes understood what legacy truly meant. It wasn't about money or fame or business success. It was about love multiplied, carried forward, and transformed into something eternal. His children were here. His family was complete. And his life had finally begun. 3 months into parenthood, Richardson discovered that love multiplied rather than divided. Every sleepless night, every diaper change, every moment of chaos only deepened his connection to Esther and their 3 perfect babies. The penthouse had transformed into a symphony of infant sounds, Miles's demanding cries, Jackson's gentle whimpers, Nova's delicate protests. Richardson had never imagined that such beautiful chaos could exist within 4 walls, but watching Esther navigate motherhood with natural grace made every moment feel like a privilege. "You're staring again," Esther said without looking up from where she sat nursing Nova, her voice tired but content. "I can't help it," Richardson replied, adjusting Miles in his arms while Jackson slept peacefully in his bassinet. "You're extraordinary." Esther had embraced motherhood with the same determination she'd shown everything else in her life. She'd mastered the art of tandem feeding, could change diapers with one hand, and somehow maintained her sanity despite averaging 3 hours of sleep per night. But Richardson could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders carried the weight of constant vigilance. They'd hired a night nurse twice a week, but Esther struggled to delegate, afraid that missing even one moment might somehow diminish her connection to their children. "When's the last time you had a bath?" Richardson asked, watching her struggle to keep her eyes open. "What's a bath?" Esther replied with a tired laugh. "Tonight," Richardson decided. "After the babies go down, you're taking a long hot bath while I handle everything else." "Richardson, you can't manage all 3 by yourself." "Watch me," he interrupted gently. "I'm their father. I need to learn to handle them without you sometimes." That evening, Richardson proved he was more capable than either of them had expected. He'd developed his own system, formula preparation at wheelchair height, burp cloths strategically placed, 3 bouncy seats positioned so he could soothe multiple babyettes simultaneously. While Esther soaked in their master bathroom, Richardson found himself in his element. Miles fussed briefly before settling into his father's arms. Jackson slept peacefully, his tiny fist curled around Richardson's finger. Nova gazed up at him with serious eyes that reminded him of Esther's intense focus. "You 3 are my greatest achievement," he whispered to them. "Not the company, not the money, not any of the things I thought mattered. You." When Esther emerged from the bathroom an hour later, she looked like herself again, refreshed, beautiful, glowing with the confidence that came from feeling human. She wore the silk robe Richardson had bought her hair damp and smelling of lavender. "How did it go?" she asked, expecting to find chaos. Instead, she found Richardson in the living room, all 3 babies content and calm. Miles was sleeping in his arms, Jackson was drowsing in his bouncy seat, and Nova was staring at the ceiling with the concentration of someone solving complex mathematical equations. "We had a good talk," Richardson said softly. "I told them about their beautiful mother and how lucky they are to have her." Esther's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the kind that came from being seen and appreciated. "I missed you," she said, settling onto the couch beside his chair. "I missed you too," Richardson replied, and they both knew he meant more than just the hour she'd been in the bathroom. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had been necessarily focused on the babies. Every conversation revolved around feeding schedules and sleep patterns. Every touch was functional, passing babies, checking temperatures, quick kisses between diaper changes. They'd been parents first, partners second, and lovers hardly at all. But tonight, with the babies finally settled and Esther looking like herself again, Richardson felt the familiar electricity that had always existed between them. "Come here," he said softly. Esther moved closer, careful not to disturb the sleeping babies. Richardson's free hand found her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent attention. "I love you," he whispered, "not just as the mother of my children, but as the woman who makes my heart beat faster every time you walk into a room." "I love you too," she replied, her voice husky with emotion, "even when I'm too tired to show it properly." Richardson leaned forward, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted of everything they'd been missing. It was gentle at first, then deeper, more urgent, as months of suppressed desire finally found expression. "The babies," Esther began, "are asleep," Richardson finished. "And we deserve this. We deserve each other." They moved to their bedroom, the baby monitor ensuring they'd hear the slightest sound. Richardson's hands rediscovered the geography of Esther's body, softer now, marked by the miracle of carrying their children, but more beautiful than ever. "You're perfect," he breathed against her neck, his lips finding the sensitive spot that made her gasp. "I'm different," she replied, suddenly self-conscious about the changes pregnancy had brought. "You're magnificent," Richardson corrected, his hands mapping every curve with worshipful attention. "You created our children with this body. You nourished them, carried them, brought them into the world. You're a goddess." Their lovemaking was different now, deeper, more meaningful, seasoned with the knowledge of what they'd created together. Every touch was a celebration, every kiss a promise, every shared breath a declaration of their unbreakable bond. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the quiet sounds of their sleeping babies in the city below. Richardson felt complete in a way he'd never experienced before, not just sexually satisfied but emotionally fulfilled. "Esther," he said softly. "Marry me." She lifted her head from his chest, her eyes searching his face. "Are you asking because we have children together?" "I'm asking because I can't imagine spending another day without you as my wife," Richardson replied honestly. "Because I want the world to know that you chose me, that we chose each other, that this family is forever." Esther's smile was radiant. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to be your wife. Yes, I want to build this life with you officially and forever." Richardson kissed her then, pouring all his love and gratitude into the connection between them. Outside, Los Angeles sparkled with possibility, but inside their bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of their love, Richardson Hayes had never felt richer. They were engaged. They were parents. They were partners in the truest sense of the word. And their greatest adventures were still ahead of them. When Miles was 6 months old, he refused to sleep unless Richardson was holding him. It was 3 a.m., and Richardson found himself in the nursery, gently bouncing his son while trying to navigate his laptop one-handed. He was researching adaptive parenting equipment, frustrated by the limited options available for parents with disabilities. "There has to be a better way," he muttered, watching Esther struggle to lift all 3 babies from their cribs simultaneously. The standard baby gear wasn't designed for parents in wheelchairs, and the few adaptive products that existed were expensive and poorly designed. That's when the idea hit him. What if we created something that actually worked? Richardson said to Esther the next morning, "Not just for us, but for every parent with a disability who's been told to make do with equipment that doesn't meet their needs." Esther looked up from where she was feeding Nova, her eyes bright with interest. "What are you thinking?" "A company. But not like before. This time, it's about purpose, not profit. We design products by parents with disabilities, for parents with disabilities." Richardson spent the next month researching, connecting with other parents who faced similar challenges. He discovered a vast, underserved market, millions of parents with various disabilities who had been essentially ignored by the baby products industry. The current market treats disability like an afterthought, Richardson explained to his first potential investor, a venture capitalist named Marcus Chen. "We're going to make it the starting point." The investor meeting took place in Richardson's penthouse, with Esther and the babies present. Richardson had learned that authenticity resonated more than polished presentations. His life was his product demonstration. "Show me what you mean," Marcus said. Richardson wheeled to the custom changing station he'd designed, height adjustable, with safety barriers and easy reach storage. "Traditional changing tables are waist-high for standing parents. Useless for me. But this." He demonstrated the smooth mechanism that brought the changing surface to his level. "This works." Marcus was taking notes, clearly impressed. "What else?" "Cribs that adjust to wheelchair height. Strollers designed for one-handed operation. High chairs that don't require you to lift a baby over your head." Richardson's enthusiasm was infectious. "We're not just solving problems, we're creating independence." Within 3 months, Richardson had secured initial funding. He named the company Trio Tech, honoring his 3 children who'd inspired the venture. But unlike his previous business endeavors, this felt different. This mattered. The first product launch was a adjustable crib system that could be operated entirely from a wheelchair. Richardson insisted on field testing everything personally, much to Esther's amusement. "You realize you're turning our babies into product testers," she said, watching him adjust the crib height for the 100th time. "They're the target demographic," Richardson replied, carefully placing a sleeping Jackson into the crib. "If it works for us, it'll work for other families." The media attention was immediate and overwhelming. Richardson's comeback story, from tragic accident to innovative entrepreneur, captured public imagination. But this time he controlled the narrative. "I'm not inspiring because I survived," he said during his first major interview. "I'm effective because I understand the market personally. My wheelchair isn't a limitation. It's my qualification." The interview aired on a Tuesday night, and by Wednesday morning, Triotech's website had crashed from traffic. Orders poured in from around the world. But more importantly, messages arrived from parents who'd felt seen for the first time. "You gave us hope," wrote a mother from Ohio whose husband had lost his legs in Afghanistan. "For the first time, we felt like we could be the parents we wanted to be." Richardson decided to expand beyond products. He began speaking at conferences, sharing his story not as a tragedy overcome, but as a perspective that created value. His first major speech was at the National Disability Conference in Chicago. Esther insisted on coming, despite the logistical nightmare of traveling with 3 infants. "You're not doing this alone," she said firmly. "We're a team." The conference center was packed with 2,000 attendees, parents, caregivers, advocates, and industry professionals. Richardson sat backstage, more nervous than he'd ever been in his previous life. "You've got this," Esther whispered, adjusting his tie while simultaneously bouncing Nova, who was fussing. Miles and Jackson were secured in their adaptive stroller, wide-eyed and curious about the bustling environment. "What if I forget what to say?" Richardson asked, his usual confidence shaken. "Then you speak from your heart," Esther replied. "You tell them about us, about the babies, about why this matters." Richardson wheeled onto the stage to thunderous applause. The crowd was on their feet, and he could see Esther in the front row, holding Nova while the boys sat alert in their stroller. His family. His reason for everything. "6 months ago, I was a father struggling to change my son's diaper," he began, his voice carrying across the auditorium. "Not because I didn't know how, but because every piece of baby equipment was designed for a world that didn't include me." He spoke about the frustration of wanting to be a hands-on parent but being blocked by poorly designed products. He shared his journey from that 3 a.m. moment of realization to building a company that prioritized inclusion over accommodation. "Disability isn't a design flaw to be fixed," Richardson said, his voice growing stronger. "It's a perspective to be valued. When we design for disability first, we create products that work better for everyone." The speech lasted 30 minutes, but it felt like seconds. When he finished, the standing ovation continued for 5 minutes. But Richardson's eyes were on Esther, who was crying tears of pride, and on his 3 children, who would grow up in a world where their father's disability was seen as a strength rather than a limitation. After the speech, Richardson was surrounded by potential partners, investors, and customers. But the moment that mattered most came when a young father approached, his toddler daughter perched on his lap in his wheelchair. "Thank you," the man said simply. "You made me believe I could be the dad I wanted to be." Richardson looked at this father, at his beautiful daughter, at the hope in both their eyes, and understood that his true legacy wasn't the technology or the business success. It was the families he'd helped, the barriers he'd broken, the world he'd helped create where disability was seen as difference, not deficiency. "No," Richardson replied, shaking the man's hand. "You already were. I just helped you see it." That night, in their hotel room, Richardson held his 3 sleeping children while Esther curled up beside him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow Triotech, new chances to change the world. But tonight, he was simply a father, a partner, and a man who'd found his purpose in the most unexpected place, not in spite of his limitations, but because of them. 2 years later, Richardson woke to the sound of 3 toddlers arguing over who got to feed Whiskey his breakfast. The golden retriever had become their patient, devoted companion, accepting endless hugs, sticky fingers, and the occasional attempt at dress-up with the grace of a saint. "Daddy," Nova's voice carried from the kitchen, followed by the rapid patter of small feet. "Miles is being mean to Whiskey." Richardson smiled, stretching in the California king bed he now shared with Esther. Mornings had become a beautiful chaos of small voices, spilled juice, and the kind of household disputes that made his heart swell with contentment. "I'll handle it," Esther mumbled sleepily, starting to rise. "Stay," Richardson said, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "It's my turn." He transferred into his wheelchair, marveling at how natural the movement had become. The chair was no longer a symbol of limitation, but simply a tool, like glasses or a smartphone, something that helped him navigate his world more effectively. In the kitchen, he found Miles attempting to pour an entire bowl of kibble, while Jackson held Whiskey's collar and Nova provided commentary from her booster seat. "Whoa there, buddy," Richardson said, swooping in to prevent a dog food avalanche. "Whiskey doesn't need that much breakfast." "But he's hungry, Daddy," Miles protested, his dark hair sticking up in 3 directions. "How do you know?" Richardson asked, genuinely curious about his son's logic. "He told me," Miles said matter-of-factly, as if conversations with dogs were perfectly normal. Richardson caught Jackson's eye roll. His quieter son had already developed a healthy skepticism about his brother's claims. Nova, meanwhile, was more interested in the patterns her cereal was making in her bowl. "All right, team," Richardson announced. "Let's get everyone fed before Mommy wakes up." The next hour was a symphony of controlled chaos. Richardson had mastered the art of simultaneous breakfast preparation, toddler mediation, and pet care. His adaptive kitchen tools made everything possible. Lowered counters, accessible storage, equipment designed for one-handed operation when necessary. "Daddy, why don't you walk like other daddies?" Nova asked suddenly, her 3-year-old directness cutting through the morning routine. Richardson paused, considering his answer. They'd had variations of this conversation before, but Nova's questions were becoming more sophisticated. "Because my legs got hurt in an accident," he said simply. "So I use wheels instead of walking. It helps me get around just fine." "But you're still fast," Miles added, remembering their race through the park the previous day. "Sometimes faster than walking daddies," Richardson agreed with a grin. "And you give the best hugs," Jackson said quietly, climbing onto Richardson's lap for a demonstration. Richardson held his son close, feeling the familiar overwhelm of gratitude. These children had never known him as anything other than their father in a wheelchair. To them, it was simply how Daddy was, no different from having brown eyes or being tall. "Good morning, Hayes family," Esther said, appearing in the doorway in her robe, her hair beautifully disheveled. "Mommy." All 3 children chorused, abandoning their breakfast to swarm her with hugs. Richardson watched the reunion, struck by how naturally beautiful Esther looked in the morning light. Motherhood had added depth to her beauty, laugh lines around her eyes, a softness in her expression that spoke of deep contentment. "Coffee?" he asked, already preparing her favorite cup. "Please," she said, settling Nova back in her booster seat. How did the Trio Tech presentation go last night? Richardson had spent the previous evening on a video call with potential international distributors. The company had grown beyond his wildest expectations, with products now sold in 12 countries and a waiting list of parents eager for their innovative solutions. "They want to license our crib system for the European market," he said, handing her the coffee. "Also, that documentary crew wants to film our family for the epilogue." Esther paused, cup halfway to her lips. "Are you sure you want the kids on camera?" "Only if you're comfortable with it," Richardson replied. "But I think it could help other families see what's possible." They'd been approached by several production companies wanting to tell their story. Richardson had been cautious, protective of their privacy, but this particular project felt different. It was about families, about love overcoming obstacles, about redefining what success looked like. "What do you think, kids?" Esther asked. "Want to be on TV? Will we be famous?" Miles asked, his eyes wide with possibility. "You're already famous to us," Richardson said, ruffling his son's hair. "The most famous kids in the world." Later, after the children had been dressed and were playing in the living room, Richardson and Esther stood together on their balcony, watching the city wake up below them. The penthouse had been transformed over the years, no longer a bachelor's showcase, but a family home filled with toys, laughter, and the comfortable chaos of people who truly lived there. "Do you ever miss it?" Esther asked, leaning against the railing. "The old life? The simplicity of just yourself to worry about?" Richardson considered the question seriously. "I miss the illusion of control," he said finally. "The belief that I could plan everything, manage every variable. But I don't miss the emptiness. I don't miss waking up every morning wondering what the point was. And now I wake up knowing exactly what the point is," Richardson replied. wrapping his arms around her from behind. You, them. This life we've built together. Esther leaned back against his chest, and Richardson marveled at how perfectly she fit against him. I love you, she said quietly. I love you too, he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for staying when I tried to push you away, for giving me a family I never knew I needed. Esther turned in his arms, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you for letting me come home. This was always your home, Richardson said, his voice rough with emotion. You just had to find your way back to it. From inside the penthouse they could hear their children playing, Miles directing some elaborate game, Jackson adding quiet suggestions, Nova providing sound effects. Whiskey barked once, probably being recruited as a reluctant participant. Our beautiful chaos, Esther said, smiling at the sounds. Our perfect life, Richardson agreed. As the Los Angeles sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Richardson held the woman he loved and listened to the laughter of their children. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, the accident that had shattered his old life, the depression that had nearly claimed him, the moment Esther had walked back into his world and changed everything. He'd built an empire once, measured success in dollars and deals. But this was legacy. This was love multiplied into something eternal. In Esther's eyes he saw his past, his present, and his future reflected back at him. He saw the boy from Brooklyn who'd fallen in love with his best friend. He saw the man who'd learned that broken could be beautiful, that different didn't mean diminished. Most of all, he saw forever, and forever had never looked so bright. And there you have it. Richardson and Esther's incredible journey from childhood friends to soulmates, from broken dreams to beautiful realities. Their story proves that love doesn't just conquer all, it transforms everything it touches. What touched your heart most about their story? Was it Richardson's resilience after his accident? Esther's unwavering loyalty, the moment they discovered they were having triplets? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing which moments resonate with you. If Richardson and Esther's love story moved you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who believes in the power of true love. Your support helps me bring you more stories about couples who prove that real love stories are the most beautiful ones of all. Don't forget to subscribe to Love in Twilights with Dr. Phillips and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new love story. I have so many more incredible tales of romance, resilience, and happily ever afters waiting for you. What kind of love story would you like to hear next? Leave your suggestions below, and remember, every great love story starts with believing that yours is possible too. Until our next twilight together, keep believing in love. Dr. Phillips.